My third and final point of disagreement, or major point of disagreement, is to do with religion and Christianity. And let me start by reiterating that I think what he's done with the Bible stories is remarkable. I've learned a huge amount from what I've seen of those lectures. I haven't watched all of them, I've watched about half of them, but I've learned a huge amount from what I've seen from those lectures. And once again, the way he draws in other sources to create this broad perspective from which to view them has been, for me anyway, entirely original and a wonderful thing. However, specifically with Christianity, and this is the religion with which he most clearly identifies himself. Obviously, I don't think that's open to dispute. Has at its core something which I think is profoundly damaging, and I would like to explore a little bit here. I'm pretty sure it's in the story of Noah that God undertakes to man never to do the whole flood thing ever again, and gives him dominion over the earth and over the animals. And so you know, this story, along with, I suspect, many others, I'm no biblical scholar, I don't know the Bible well, reinforces something which to me is at the very, very, very core of Christianity, which is an idea of separation between God, man and nature. It's like a triumvirate of three separate things, that God created nature, God created man, God inserted man into nature, and God gave man dominion over nature. And these ideas, which I think run deep, deep, deep in the psyche of the Western mind, are responsible, in my opinion, for a huge amount of the external and internal destruction going on at the moment. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, or a better idea, I should say, of what I'm talking about, in the Eastern philosophies, in Buddhism, for example, God or the Buddha or whatever is in all things, right? I mean, all things, both animate and inanimate, as we would call them, contain within them the Buddha. And so what you do to the world around you, you also do to yourself. It's one continuous, interconnected, inseparable thing. And, you know, every single thing is a manifestation of God, is a manifestation of the Buddha. And as I said, that which you do to your world, you do in a very, very real way to yourself, because you are the world and the world is you. And to me, this connectedness with the world around you, with nature, with everybody else, seeing all things as God manifest in physical form or whatever, I think this is absent from Christianity, and is, for me, the biggest reason not to be of that. I mean, listen, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the brotherhood of man and forgiveness and tolerance and understanding and love and all of that, I'm absolutely all on board with that. He was by no means the first person to preach that kind of thing, but the mythology that underlies it, and that separation of God from man, from nature, and again, I'm quite willing to accept that there is a deficiency in my own understanding of Christianity. Like I said, I am no scholar, but that does seem to me to be, and I'm not the only one to think this, as Joseph, oh God, his name escapes me, begins with a C, I can't think of his name, it'll come to me anyway, talks about this also, about this failing in Christianity, that it fails to appreciate the divine in all things, you know, that all things have a soul, all beings have a soul, it's not unique to man. And this sense of superiority that man has, and that he has the right to impose his will through force over nature in order to make life better for him, I think is really, you know, because it encourages us to see the world as a bunch of stuff out there that we can use any way that we like. And that seems to me to be right at the heart of how we are able to treat the world as we do. And I'm not talking about climate change. Just like Mr. Peterson, I have deep suspicions about the climate change narrative which is being forced down my throat, just for the very simple reason that it's being forced down my throat. That makes me extremely suspicious. But there is no doubt that the amount of plastic we're throwing into the ground and into the water, the toxification of freshwater supplies, the stripping of forests, the loss of soil as a consequence of deforestation, the chemical runoff, the blah blah blah. I mean, there's a million things, all of which need urgent attention. You know, species die off. You know, there are many things, all of which need urgent attention. And for me, the climate change narrative is once again a distraction from doing anything about all of these things, which actually there are ready available solutions to. Instead, we're too busy squabbling about who's right over climate change. But anyway, that to one side, that narrative. And again, to Mr. Peterson, thank you for introducing Conrad? No, it's not Conrad. Anyway, thank you again for introducing me to the idea of the power of story to shape not only our reality but the way that we function in the world. And but I do think adhering to and internalizing flawed stories is extremely dangerous. And for me, the Judeo-Christian narrative of God, man, nature is deeply flawed. It encourages us to exploit and destroy the world around us, and not to honour, cherish, worship it in every action interaction that we take with it. There is no way, if we saw every being as having a soul very much like our own, that we would treat our livestock the way that we do. For example, you know, we love our pets and yet we go down and we buy steaks. Anyway, again, it's not really a thing I want to get into, but I hope I've made my point. It was Joseph Campbell I was talking about, not Joseph Conrad. He wrote Hearts of Darkness, of course. Joseph Campbell was also very into mythology. I mean, he spent his whole life exploring mythologies from all over the world, in particular looking for similarities, cross-cultural, cross-temporal similarities, and then looking at differences in order to isolate what was cultural and what was, you know, deeply embedded in the human psyche. Not dissimilar to, well, in fact, was informed by Jung's work, as is Jordan Peterson. So one of the points that Campbell makes is that when things are changing very rapidly, it's impossible for new mythologies to emerge, because it obviously takes time for them to find expression. And you know, he was writing primarily back in the 60s, 70s, but the same is absolutely true today, even more so, that things are changing so quickly that it's all but impossible for new myths, new stories to develop. But I guess if there is an overarching point to this video, then it would be a plea for people to try and let or make room for the possibility of new stories in their minds and in their hearts, because the ones that we currently have are stories of money, are stories of Judeo-Christian tradition, are stories of power, and so on, are all rooted in what Charles Eisenstein refers to as the story of separation, where, you know, as I've already talked about, you know, the world's a bunch of stuff out there which is for us to use, and we're not in any way personally connected with it, and our stories don't allow us to be. You know, we see everything in physical terms, that we ourselves, our awareness, our consciousness, is nothing more than the consequence of chemical reactions taking place, atoms and electrons and, you know, waves of energy moving according to deterministic laws. And I mean, I can't prove it's otherwise, but my own experience doesn't feel like that. Nobody's experience feels like that. And so, you know, if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck, it's a duck, or whatever the phrase is. It's something like that. I can't remember. It escapes me exactly what it is. So yeah, we really need to start coming up with, circulating, reinforcing, telling ourselves new kinds of stories, where the underlying substrate is one of connectedness and not of separation. Because however much you deny the reality of the fact that we are connected to everything around us, and everything around us is, you know, we're part of it and it's part of us. Even if you don't believe that, it doesn't stop it being true. It doesn't stop the consequences of our actions being devastating, ultimately to ourselves. And so, you know, if for nothing other than self-interest, we really need to start developing some new stories. Anyway, I'm starting to repeat myself, so thank you very much for those of you that are watching for watching. If you think I'm saying interesting things, then please spread the word. I guess ultimately what I'm hoping is that this gets back to Jordan Peterson himself, and you know, that he thinks them worthy of consideration and responds to them in some way. But you know, that's unlikely. Well, who the fuck am I? 42 subscribers, right? So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll make something else soon. Bye.